I think it's Fridays now. There's a new schedule out. And today we're, okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Excuse me. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 9, and today's text is text number 45. So you'll have to forgive me for the Sanskrit pronunciations, but we will try. Hamsaya dhare nilayaya niriksakaya krishnaya mrista yasase nirupakramaya sat sangrahaya bhava panta nijasramaptav ante parista kataye hareye namaste. So we'll do the... Anybody wants to recite?
I'll give it a shot. This is that meter that we use for the Govindam prayers.
Right.
Hamshaya Tara Nilayaya Nirikshakaya Krishnaya Mrishta Yashase Nirupakramaya Satsangrahaya Bhavapanta Nijashram Bhatav Ante Parishta Gataye Haraye Namaste.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Hamsaya, unto the most exalted and pure, Pavitram Paramam, the supreme pure, Dhara, in the core of the heart, Nilayaya, whose abode, Niriksakaya, supervising the activities of the individual soul, Krishnaya, unto the supersoul, who is a partial manifestation of Krishna. Mrista Yasase, whose reputation is very bright. Nirupakramaya, who has no beginning. Sat Sangrahaya, understood only by pure devotees. Bhava Panta Nija Asrama Apto, being obtainment of the shelter of Krishna for persons within this material world. Ante, at the ultimate end. Parista Gataye, unto him who is the supreme goal, the highest success of life. Haraye, unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nama, respectful obeisances, te, unto you. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. O Lord, O Supreme Pure, you live within the core of everyone's heart and observe all the desires and activities of the conditioned souls. O Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Lord Krishna, your reputation is bright and illuminating. You have no beginning, for you are the beginning of everything. This is understood by pure devotees because you are easily accessible to the pure and truthful. When the conditioned souls are liberated and sheltered at your lotus feet, after roving throughout the material world for many millions of years, they attain the highest success of life. Therefore, O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, we offer our respectful obeisances at your lotus feet. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The demigods certainly wanted Lord Vishnu to relieve their anxiety, but now they directly approach Lord Krishna. For although there is no difference between Lord Krishna and Lord Vishnu, Krishna descends to this planet in his Vasudev feature for the purpose of paritranaya sadhunam vinayasaya cha duskritam, protecting his devotees and annihilating the miscreants. Demons or atheists always disturb the demigods or devotees, and therefore Krishna descends to punish the atheists and demons and fulfill the desire of his devotees. Krishna, being the original cause of everything, is the Supreme Person, even above Vishnu and Narayan, although there is no difference between these two forms of the Lord. As explained in Brahma Samhita 546, Dipachir eva hi dasantaram abhyupetya dipayate vivrita hetu samana dharma yat yas tadrig eva hi cha visnuta vibhati govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. Krishna expands himself as Vishnu, the way a bright candle kindles another. Although there is no difference between the power of one candle and another, Krishna is compared to the original candle. The word Mrista Yasase is significant herein because Krishna is always famous for relieving his devotees from danger. A devotee who has sacrificed everything for the service of Krishna and whose only source of relief is the Lord is known as a Kinchana. As expressed in the prayers offered by Queen Kunti, the Lord is Akinchana Vita, the property of such a devotee. Those who are liberated from the bondage of conditioned life are elevated to the spiritual world, where they achieve 5 kinds of liberation: Sayujya, Salokya, Sarupya, Sarsti, and Samipya. They personally associate with the Lord in 5 mellows: Santa, Dasya, Sakyam, Vatsalya, and Madhurya. These rasas are all emanations from Krishna. As described by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the original mellow, Adi Ras, is conjugal love. Krishna is the origin of pure and spiritual conjugal love. Om Gyana Timrandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumitam Yana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Vancha Kalpa Trubhyasya Kripa Sindhu Revacha Patita Nama Pavanabhyo Vaishnavabhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasti Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, of course, we're continuing to read about the appearance and death of this demon Vritrasura. So, very, very powerful demon. Of course, the demon was invoked by Twasta, and the idea was that he wanted to create a very powerful demon that would kill Indra. But of course, we find that, in the previous Yuga, it was not in this Kali Yuga. It's not so powerful in this Kali Yuga. But he had mispronounced one word. So instead of making a demon to kill Indra, he had produced this demon Vitrasura, who would be killed by Indra. And so we'll hear later, of course, how in this battle with this great demon that Vitrasura, of course, wants to be killed by Indra. And, even though Indra had cut off his one arm, still, he is pushing on Lord Indra that go on, don't lose, hope. Because at some point in the battle, we find that his thunderbolt weapon, which he had got from Lord Vishnu, had fallen, and then he had kind of like lost composure. But Vitrasura, of course, wants to be killed, so he's encouraging Indra, please, pick up your weapon and, gain courage again and continue, fighting. Because ultimately we find that, as the chapter progresses, or the future chapters, as it progresses, we find that this demon Vitrasura, in his previous life, he was Chitraketu. And of course, we know that pastime, we already covered that previously, that in that pastime, Chitraketu, he was cursed by Mother Parvati. And so in this case, he had taken birth as this demon, but the Lord wanted him to come back home sooner than later. And so this, pastime was going on so that he can go home a lot quicker. And so it was his desire, in one sense, to be killed by Indra so that, he could go back home. And so as the chapters progress, we'll read more about that pastime and how eventually that happened. And so we find in the end, even after Indra kills Vitrasura, but he was such a huge, gigantic demon that we'll read later that it actually took Indra 365 days to cut off his head. And so imagine how enormous, and these weren't just a regular kitchen knife that he was using to cut off his head. So they were using so many powerful weapons back then. And so despite that, it took 365 days. So in this verse, what's significant is you live within the core of everyone's heart. So we're reminded of Bhagavad Gita in 222, that there is the living entity, so we need to differentiate. Information is given about the soul and the super soul. And so there's various verses describing what's the relationship between the soul and the super soul within the core of the heart. And so this verse is explaining that, O Lord, O Supreme Pure, you live within the core of everyone's heart and observe all the desires and activities of the conditioned souls. And so in verse 22, the translation is, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. So we understand that there is transmigration of the soul, the spirit soul. The spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces, and it is existing within the core of the heart of the living entity, alongside the super soul. And so in that purport, Prabhupada gives the example, which he quotes from the Svetasvara Upanishad. Excuse me, sorry. I have some frog in my throat. Okay, apologies for that. So the Mundaka Upanishad and the Svetasvara Upanishad, they give the description of the soul and the super soul existing within the heart, and they give the analogy of the two birds. And so one of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruit of the tree, and the other bird is, thank you, the other bird, which is none other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, the super soul, is simply watching his friend. Of these two birds, although they are the same in quality, One is captivated by the fruits of the material tree, that means the body, and the other is simply witnessing and the activities of his friend. So Krishna is the witnessing bird, and in this case, in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is the eating bird. So although they are friends, one is still master and the other one is servant. And so forgetfulness of the relationship of the atomic soul is the cause of one's transmigrating from one tree to another, from one body to another. And in this way, we've been transmigrating through 8,400,000 species of life. And ultimately, we continue this struggle from one tree to another, taking different bodies continuously. So we see here the demigods are making prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Yesterday, Nagari Krishna was giving the nice example of how that just by making prayers, just by vandanam, we understand that there's 9 processes of devotion, and any one of these 9 processes of devotion, one can go back home, back to Godhead. It's not that you have to do all 9 perfectly, but any one of them we can perfect and go back home, back to Godhead. So the other important point in this verse, you have no beginning, for you are the beginning of everything. This is understood by pure devotees. So we can use, this verse just like how we are citing, different verses in different places of the Bhagavatam or the Bhagavad Gita, where, different points are made. We can actually use this particular verse, 6.9.45, as a reference to show that, Krishna has no beginning. Because, of course, that's as we start our journey, questioning, who am I, what am I, why am I here, what is my purpose? So we find, yesterday Nagari Krishna was mentioning, we find that there are 4 different types of persons that approach the Supreme Lord, and they have different motivations. And so we find that there is, even if we drill down further, those are 4 types of devotees. And what are the 4 types of devotees? Bhagavad Gita 7.16 gives the example. O best among the Bharatas, the 4 kinds of pious men begin to render devotional service: the distressed, the desire of wealth, the inquisitive, and he who is searching for knowledge of the Absolute. And so in a similar fashion, there are also 4 types of miscreants who never surrender unto the Supreme Lord. So in this case, we can see that the demigods are definitely in the mode of goodness, very, very empowered personalities. But of course, they have this one defect, so to speak, that they still have a desire for sense gratification. So, we'll read later again how, Indra is making all these nice prayers right now, but, he has some ulterior motive. And of course, these examples are given to show that, yes, whilst these demigods are such empowered persons, mode of goodness, we're still aspiring for these things. We should not get distracted on our journey of bhakti, because when one gets distracted, like the demigods, they have this desire still for sense gratification. And in this way, they have to continuously take birth again. So very, very difficult if one is distracted like this. We see other powerful examples of sorry, I'm thinking of Maharaj Bharat. How, he was at the point of bhava, almost at love of Godhead. Still, due to his attachment to the deer, he had to take another birth. So this journey of bhakti is in one sense very, very simple, but at the same time, it can get complicated if we don't understand and pursue the goal with determination. So we need to use our intelligence, and there's just so much of misery in the material world that we can very easily become distracted, but we want to remain fixed. The idea is to go back home, back to Godhead in this lifetime. Don't wait to take another body, because we don't know what this next body is going to be. And we may end up just, transmigrating again, depending on how much of spiritual advancement we made. So we understand the best process that, all our acharyas agree, all the Vedic scriptures give, is that one has to engage in devotional service. And in that light, of course, it's not just ordinary devotional service. We want to strive to do pure devotional service. Anya bilasita sunyam jnana karmadi anavritam anukulena krishnanu bhakti silanam uchate. So we want to practice devotional service without any tinge of wanting anything other than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the other point this verse is making is that you are easily accessible to the pure and truthful. So this is understood by pure devotees, because you are easily accessible to the pure and truthful. So, this idea of surrendering and serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead is, in one sense, an easy process, very, very accessible. And the other verse is saying that one has to be pure and truthful. These are two of the conditions that make, access to the Supreme Personality of Godhead very, very simple. So over the last few weeks also, we've been covering so many nice points. One of them was that, for us as devotees, we should try to practice the 26 qualities of a devotee. And in this way, we can come closer to the goal. I was trying to think of examples, maybe we can cover that in the Q&A, of persons who have, the 26 qualities of a devotee, who have been practicing the path of bhakti, that, does not have access to the Supreme Lord. And so, as one chants with sincerity, with devotion, associates with devotees, takes Krishna prasadam, these are kind of like the basics, yet still by the power of, practicing sadhana bhakti, we can easily access the goal, which is to go back home, back to Godhead. And the verse further states, when the conditioned souls are liberated and sheltered at your lotus feet, after roving throughout the material world for many, many millions of years, they attain the highest success of life. Therefore, O Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, we offer our respectful obeisances at your lotus feet. And so in the purport, Prabhupada is mentioning how, that Lord Krishna descends. Of course, we understand from Bhagavad Gita also that the Lord descends, paritranaya sadhunam vinasaya cha duskritam, that he wants to annihilate the demons and protect his devotees. So that's one of the main reasons why the Lord descends. Then Prabhupada is making the distinction that there is Lord Krishna, there is Lord Vishnu, there is Lord Narayan, and there's so many other expansions. But Krishna descends to this planet in his Vasudev feature. And so Prabhupada is making the point that there's no difference between Vishnu and Krishna. And of course, he gives the example from the Brahma Samhita. Krishna expands himself as Vishnu the way a bright candle kindles another. So if you take one candle and light another candle, so, both of them, if they're identical candles, they'll have identical power of the candle. So in one sense, there's no difference between the two candles or the flames, but still there is one original candle that you used to light the other candle. So in this way, there is no difference between Vishnu and Krishna. And it is actually the original Krishna that expands himself as Vishnu. Then Prabhupada is mentioning, of course, the famous Queen Kunti. And of course, we covered in previous weeks also the example of Queen Kunti, that her prayers are, my dear Lord, please bring on the calamities, because when there is calamities, I can remember you. And so remembering the Lord, of course, we understand is, very, very powerful. And Queen Kunti, of course, is just being very, very practical and pragmatic about, remembering the Lord to that extent that she's saying, bring on the calamities, because otherwise when there's enjoyment, it's difficult in one sense to remember you. But when there's calamities, then one is constantly thinking, how to get out of a situation, and praying to the Supreme Lord in this way. So we should not get ourselves in these difficult circumstances where we can only remember the Lord when there's calamities. We want to constantly hear and remember the Lord in all circumstances of life, whether we are working, having a regular job, whatever activities we are doing. Prabhupada says, 24 hours a day we should be engaged in devotional service. And in the association of devotees, it becomes a lot simpler, remembering the Lord. And we should not take it for granted that, we have this facility in our temples, so many places around the world, where this opportunity is there to associate with devotees, to practice bhakti yoga, to take Krishna Prasadam together, and discuss topics about Krishna. No doubt we are in this material world, of course, a very, very difficult situation, circumstance, place to live in. Dukkha, it's a place of misery and suffering. And, sometimes it can become very challenging for the mind. We understand the mind is very, very chanchala. Arjuna, points out that the mind is, so impetuous, can be carried away like the wind. We've covered also how, another example is given in the Vedas of the mind being like a drunk monkey who has been stung by a scorpion and haunted by a ghost. There's no telling what it'll do next. But still, by the process of, hearing, associating with devotees, reading, chanting, we can gradually try to train this mind, who has been conditioned from so many millions and millions of births. Because originally we are all Krishna conscious. And we want to shed all of these layers. So the idea is to stick to the process of Krishna consciousness. And of course, one nice example is given by Prabhupada that, even though, this hearing, associating, chanting with devotees, initially might not be very, very tasty, still we should stick to the process. So the example is given that, when someone has jaundice, not many treatments are available and for jaundice, but one of the treatments is that one has to take sugar candy to cure jaundice. But when one eats the sugar candy, it tastes very, very bitter. So you don't really want to eat it, but you have to stick with the process that this is the cure. Have sugar candy, even though it is bitter, stick with the process and we will get the results. And I think, all of us as devotees can testify that, after we've come to Krishna consciousness and, seriously started to take up the process of Krishna consciousness, then, we can see that we are advancing. We are making spiritual advancement. Some taste is gradually coming. It's not, continuous all of the time, but gradually, some taste is coming. And so in this way, we can cure this jaundice of attachment to the material world, attachment to sense gratification. We can, by the process of Krishna consciousness, we can cure this jaundice. What else? And then just one more point is that, of course, in this idea of, the mind constantly wanting some sense gratification, we understand that, just by gratifying the senses, our own personal senses, we get more and more entangled in material life. So even though it might seem, very, very nice, gratifying our senses, eating something, tasty, but if it's not Krishna prasadam, then, we find that we're gradually getting more and more entangled in this material world. Even our work, depending on what kind of work we're doing and for what purpose, we can get entangled. So for example, we see the classic example is there of Arjuna, that, he was called to fight. So initially, he didn't want to fight because, he was thinking, what is the use of, killing my family members, my grandfather, going to battle with them? And so he was seeing it from a very, very mundane, materialistic perspective initially, that if I just, engage in this work, what is the use? But of course, gradually Krishna enlightens him that if you do this work in Krishna consciousness, then you're a Kshatriya, and then you're fighting because of religion, religious principles, and not just, because we want to win a war. No, there's, a deeper meaning, there's Krishna consciousness behind it. So when it is a situation like that, then we see that it is not entangling. That even though he was doing the same work, so to speak, same activity, but the consciousness was different, that one gradually can be liberated just even by doing their work. So it all depends on our level of Krishna consciousness and desires of what our goal is. And if we want to continue staying in this material world, then we just have to keep changing bodies, lifetime after lifetime. And like we said, we don't know what body we're going to get next. So we don't, of course, want to go back to the lower species of life. In the case of Maharaj Bharat, he was, of course, pure devotee, but when he took birth as a deer, he was able to remember. And we don't have that ability to remember, our past lives and where we've been. how we've been transmigrating. We don't have that memory. We also don't want to get caught up, doing good. And, sometimes people say that, I'm a nice person. I, try to do pious things, but we don't want to get caught in that cycle. Again, it, is one of these traps to distract us from the goal, because if we just, engage in pious activities, then we have to take another birth for all these good things that we've done to come back to us. So neither do we want to do bad things, because again, we have to suffer the reaction of both good and bad things. We want to engage in spiritual activities, and for that there is no reaction. So even like Arjuna engaging in spiritual activities, even killing, there's no reaction, because he was worried that what kind of reaction I'll have to take if I kill, especially all the soldiers on the battlefield. Then the woman will be unprotected. They won't have husbands. Women and children won't be protected. So he was initially thinking like that. But when one engages in spiritual activities, then there is no reaction. So in the core of our hearts, we want to keep Lord Krishna there, and we want to keep the spiritual master and his instructions. And so then there won't be any place for all these demoniac qualities to exist at the same time. So we want to increase our Krishna consciousness, softening the heart, like we said last time. We want to soften the heart to the point where soften the heart like butter, so that Krishna will come and steal it. Okay, that's all I have, devotees. Any comments, questions, corrections? Hopefully everyone's still there. Everyone fall asleep? Now everyone's there.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol.
Yeah, thank you for a nice class. You covered a lot of territory. Left my head spinning here. I'm trying to think of what to comment on. Bunch of nice points in this verse, but honestly, what I keep thinking about is Buddha Prabhupada's discussion of akinchana. To be honest, it scares me, because I like to think that I'm very detached. A lot of Lakshmi passes through my hands. I don't spend it on myself. I try to engage it all in devotional service. But when I examine myself, I find that there is still an attachment, because at least in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that, well, if it came down to it, if I wanted to, or if I had an emergency or something, I could fall back on this Lakshmi. I could solve a lot of my problems with that Lakshmi, and And so for devotees who maintain an attachment like that, depending upon um, material opulence, um, for example, rather than taking complete shelter of Krishna, um, if Krishna is very kindly disposed towards that devotee, he will relieve them of that opulence because it becomes an impediment to complete um, surrender, complete dependence upon Krishna. So my preference would be to have my cake and eat it too. I'd like to be Krishna conscious. I'd like to fully take shelter of Krishna, but I would prefer not to lose the opulence if that's at all possible. I enjoy being able to engage Lakshmi in Krishna's service, but I have this fear that because I do have I can see that I'm thinking that I can rely upon that Lakshmi to solve problems in my life rather than thinking um, in a helpless condition I have no shelter but Krishna. So I actually worry that Krishna may be merciful to me and relieve me of that impediment. Do you have any advice for?
Hey, Krishna. You're not supposed to ask that question. But thank you for sharing that from the core of your heart. I pray that, all of us, well, myself, not all of us, I pray that, we can be as honest and, straight from the heart, just like you are sharing. So thank you so much for being, so vulnerable and, sharing so openly with the devotees. Yeah, I find, that sometimes it is difficult, for devotees to be open and share. And, everybody's got some secret and confidential stuff. Yes, of course, we don't want, to display, all of our laundry in public in one sense. But, amongst devotees, we want to try to cultivate, many, many friendships. But now that you are sharing, this from the core of your heart, we understand from this verse that Krishna also is there in the core of your heart too. But of course, when you started to share, I was just thinking of Prabhupada, his personal example, and Prabhupada, I think he also had this idea that as a businessman, he wanted to share. I think he said something, right? If I remember correctly, he said something to the effect that he wanted to share Krishna consciousness as a rich man. Because if he had so much of Lakshmi, unlimited amounts of Lakshmi, he could have just been erecting temples in practically every, not major city, in practically every small town and village, if he had access to this kind of Lakshmi. But we see that Krishna's plan was a little different. That eventually Prabhupada came to the West with, I forget how many rupees he came to the West with. So Prabhupada also said, I think there was some argument that he wanted to spread as a rich man and Krishna wanted it done otherwise. And so, I don't think Prabhupada deliberately just dropped everything, dropped his business. He continued pursuing things to the point where, it gradually, went down. And, at that time, of course, his children was already growing up. And so you still have some responsibility at least. And, we're all in the material world and we have certain responsibilities. So I would say that if it's all being used very, very nicely in Krishna's service, then, Krishna can decide, where and what. Yes, the preference is there. I think, of course, the temple is a benefactor also. And so I'm also inclined to pray to the Supreme Lord that somehow or the other, we should continue developing and expanding Gita Nagari. And so I thank you, for all your tireless services here in Gita Nagari, just number one, staying in Gita Nagari, despite, the ups and downs and, the lows in Gita Nagari, that, Gita Nagari's been through. You've just continued to stay. You could have easily moved to Alachua and, had nice associations. So many senior God brothers, God sisters are there. The temple is nicely situated. They don't have a want for, Lakshmi. But, you chose to, even when you didn't have, chose to continue staying. So Krishna has arranged certain things. And who knows the plan of the Lord? All we can do is we can, stay fixed in our vows, stay fixed in our service to Srila Prabhupada, eternally grateful for the opportunity of service, because it's a very, very rare thing to have, this devotional service opportunity. So associating with devotees, giving association to, all of us junior devotees, is very, very important for us in our journey of bhakti. So I can't thank you enough. I've mentioned many times personally I'm eternally indebted to you and for all that you have done. And gradually let's see how Krishna plays all of these things out in all of our lives. We know the idea is that as we surrender, Krishna will take so many steps towards us. And I think the beauty is going to be, we might not live to tell the tale, but we might. But the beauty will be there that ultimately we know Krishna is there for us. And it does not matter whether there is Lakshmi or there isn't Lakshmi. There is always going to be opportunities for devotional service and Krishna. And so if we can somehow try to hold on to that, because for myself personally, leaving a corporate job and, engaging in devotional service like this also, was a huge thing. And that worry was always there, is still always there. Did we do the right thing? Did I do the right thing? But still, we're all trying to surrender to the Supreme Lord. And we have sufficient faith that Krishna is there. And this is why, we continue reading, studying the Bhagavatam, because we can see there's countless examples that the Lord was always there for his devotees. And, this is one of the reasons that he descends. Again and again, we're reminded, like in this verse, we're reminded, why does he descend? To protect his devotees, annihilate the demons. And so we can rest assured, there's just countless examples. I'm thinking of Sudama Brahman. He was so destitute, so poor. Dhruva Maharaj, he was hurt so badly, when he wasn't allowed, to sit on his father's lap, that, he wanted a kingdom so much bigger. And so all of these, devotees. And then, of course, just in our generation, we've seen so many devotees, leaving their bodies in such amazing ways. I think we have, sufficient faith that, yes, Krishna will be there for us. Enough talking. Devotees, if someone else wants to share, please share your thoughts and realizations.
All right, Krishna, Dhruva Maharaj. Actually, I had two questions for you. I don't know if we're going to have time. So the first one was when you mentioned about the atomic soul being like a drunk monkey and on fire, and and it was wonderful. It was such a really, I could see it. But then also I was thinking about that. Then we can also though become attached to the mode of goodness, and wanted you to speak a little bit about that, like how when we become attached to that, does that actually become sort of an enemy of the best thing, surrender? But I had another question that came up, because in the translation it says that we're under the supervision, that the atomic soul is under the supervision of the super soul. And then I often hear it stated like the birds on the wire, that one is, enjoying and the other is just observing. And then you mentioned today that Krishna, that it was like Krishna and Arjuna, but Krishna really gave direction. So at what point does the super soul give direction or become a guide and a counselor and not just an observer? Or does that happen? Does that
Yes,
happen for each of us?
yes, it definitely can happen for each and every. That's my understanding. It can happen for each and every one of us. That the super soul is there as witness, overseer, and permitter initially, but at some point, and the example is there with Arjuna as well. At some point, he had all of these, drama going on in his mind. No, I shouldn't do that. No, I shouldn't do this. He was confused. He was bewildered. But then at some point, when we surrender, and that's what Arjuna did, eventually he said, I'm a soul surrendered unto you, Lord Krishna, give me direction. And so we all can come to that point as well, that yes, the super soul is there, giving just witness, overseer, and permitter. But then at some point, in our practice of sadhana bhakti, we need to follow the procedure. If we follow the procedure of, practicing devotional service according to, like how we're discussing now and trying to understand better, at some point, we living entities can turn to the super soul to give us direction of, what is the best thing to do. And it is a journey. It's not just going to happen overnight, but it definitely can happen to the degree that we want it to happen. So my understanding is that, right now, sometimes, we say, I had a premonition that I should, go to Washington, D.C. And so is that the mind, or is that the super soul giving direction? So, the super soul is ready, but we have to turn to Krishna to, surrender to him so that he can give the direction from within us. And I think, like I said, it is a journey. And gradually, that's why we want to take association of pure devotees, take instruction, take guidance, take shelter of our seniors. Also association needs to be there, with peers. And then we also need to learn how to deal with juniors. So, when all of these ingredients are very, very nicely, being adhered to, one can feel, even sometimes that there is advancement. If I think about my life 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and where I was, and, what my ideas, thoughts, and plans were, very, very different from today. 16 years here at Gita Nagari, trying to serve the cows and, make friends, get association, very, very different journey. I knew about Krishna, before I became a devotee, but not to the depth and realization that, I have today. So yes, we can, take this direction, and sometimes it might be a personal thing. And sometimes, we know that, Krishna is giving direction. Most times, when we're in a dilemma specifically, if we're not sure exactly what to do. But if we have, the sincerity of practice, then, sometimes it is very evident that, yes, I should do this. I'm just thinking for myself, when I made the decision, to leave my job, okay, yes, senior devotees were encouraging, do like this. But still, I was hesitant, maybe initially, is it the right thing to do? But, I was already following the process. I was on the path. And then Krishna gave some courage and conviction from within to make that jump. Now, of course, we didn't have children. I think I always tell devotees, if we had children, Parijat and I had children, maybe the jump might have been more difficult to attain, to do. But I can say that, based on my practice at the time, I was a new devotee still. Even then, that conviction came. that yes, let's, make the transition, let's come to Gita Nagari. So I think we can all, relate to even taking up Krishna consciousness as a simple example that, even just to take up Krishna consciousness, we had to make a decision that, I'm going to go and associate, I'm going to go to the temple, I'm going to go and associate, with these people who wear bed sheets, stuff like that, simple things. We have to make that conscious decision. And I think, Krishna from within is also helping us in these decisions. So it's not that we are completely abandoned. So that I think is the second point. I can't remember now the first point, what your question was. Yes, the mind is like a drunk monkey.
I think you covered them both. Just that not being attached so much either to the mode of goodness, right, where we substitute that for surrender.
Right. And so the mode of goodness, again, we mentioned that the demigods, they mostly in the mode of goodness. We want to get to the mode of goodness. Now we've got so much of conditioning, layers of baggage that we're carrying for lifetimes. We came from the mode of ignorance where we didn't know about Krishna and, what is the purpose of life. So, we gradually in this mode of passion, then we get very, very passionate. No, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do it like this. So this passion is there, but we want to gradually bring ourselves to the mode of goodness. We want to get, to all these nice habits, in our daily life, brushing our teeth, simple things that might seem very simple and mundane, but, we want to get to good habits. And when we have good habits, how to eat, how to, wash our mouth, after taking prasadam, what is mochi, what is suchi, all of these good habits. We want to get to the mode of goodness. And from that mode of goodness, it becomes a little easier for us to make the jump. But yes, you're right. We can get confused like the demigods. They, have this still desire for sense gratification. And that's why they're living in the heavenly planets. But we understand from the Vedic scriptures, from the Bhagavatam, that don't get distracted with, the mode of goodness and just doing good things. Also, that, you can take another birth. So we need to stay clear of the goal. We want to be like Arjuna. You remember when the 5 Pandavas, they were being trained with archery. And so the guru asked, can you see the eye of the fish? And he asked each one of the brothers, what do you see? And, they said they see the sky, they said they see this, they see the fish body, they see this. And when Arjuna came, what do you see? I only see the eye of the fish. Do you see anything else? No. Then he told him to shoot. And of course, he was able to shoot the eye of the fish. So we need to, in that way, be steady that I want to practice, spiritual life. I want to, do things on the spiritual platform. And so, yes, it can become confusing from time to time. But, in the association of devotees, that's why we don't want to do it alone. If we just do it alone, it's me, myself, and I, just the 3 of us. My mind is there. And yeah, we want to do it in the association of devotees. So we want to check and, have checks and balances. And like this, we won't get too attached to this mode of goodness only. And then, take another birth as a result. That's my understanding. Anybody else has nice examples, analogies to share, please? Thank you for a nice question.
Hey, with regards to Supersoul, Paramatma, my understanding is that Paramatma is actually providing direction all the time. The difficulty is that we are unable to hear. We can't distinguish between the dictates of our mind and the guidance provided by Paramatma. So we require purification. And gradually, by practicing Krishna consciousness, we become sufficiently pure that we can purely hear the direction given by Paramatma without confusing.
Mhm.
I don't know, that's my understanding.
Mhm.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Taraka Prabhu. Thank you, Dhruva Maharaj. And I'm just from what Taraka Prabhu just said. So then I would think that that's why we need gurus so desperately, because we need guidance, and we would be mixing it all up. Like you said, it would be me, myself, and I. And I'm probably my own worst enemy at that point. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, thank you. Um, Actually, in Taraka Prabhu, in that purport to 222, Prabhupada gives that analogy in detail.
Oh, you just reminded me of another point. You were speaking about Srila Prabhupada making essentially a blind leap when he came to the U.S. with very little Lakshmi. And I think it was, I don't know, 47 rupees or something that he had. What sometimes devotees don't realize is that it's if you take rupees out of India, they become useless. You can't exchange rupees outside of India. So he actually had nothing. He had no Lakshmi. What made it possible for him to survive was that he sold a set of Bhagavatams to the captain of the Jaladuta. And from that he got $20.
Oh, wow.
So he had $20 with him.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, this purport gives a little more insight on 222, Bhagavad Gita 222. It gives more insight on this witness, overseer, and permitter, and how that process worked with Arjuna. So Prabhupada is saying in that purport that as Arjuna agreed to do by voluntary surrender unto Krishna for instruction, the subordinate bird immediately becomes free from all lamentations. Although the two birds are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as they enjoy of the fruits of the tree. But if in some way or other he turns his face to his friend, the Lord, and knows his glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free from all anxieties. Arjuna has now turned his face toward his eternal friend Krishna and is understanding the Bhagavad Gita from him. And thus, hearing from Krishna, he can understand the supreme glories of the Lord and be free from lamentation. Okay, thank you, devotees. Hare Krishna. I think the curtains are getting ready to open.